Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the front room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose, as long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. This is your host, Sean. On this episode, we have Chicago teams giveth, Chicago teams taketh, and I owe a big apology. All of this and more on this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the Stars of Tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. This season, the regular season starts in just a couple of short days. October 22nd against the Milwaukee Admirals. Head on over to icehogs.com. Get yourself a hat, a jersey, a shirt, and tickets for the game. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. Alright, in this episode, we're going to start with a little Cubs and wrap it up with some Bears. And I know the show's super late, and I apologize for that. Life gets in the way sometimes when you have a toddler and a wife getting over an illness and a death in the family and a full-time job and blah, blah, blah. You don't care. You just like, shut up and talk sports so I can yell at you through my internets. So when we last did the show, we were still at the end of the Giants-Cubs series. And it played out a little bit like I had predicted to some degree. I expected the loss in Game 3 with Madison Bumgarner pitching and to go on and win Game 4 and the Cubs to win that series 3-1. And that much did hold true. But it was the way it happened was a little different than I expected it. And it happened in a kind of crazy way. If you're not familiar, not keeping up, you're a Bears fan just listening through this, or you just want to relive these moments, the Cubs got to Madison Bumgarner. And the funny thing is you look at his numbers, and in the last few years, he's been pretty much unstoppable in the playoffs. But over his career, he's just a pretty decent pitcher in the playoffs. Nothing super fantastic, but it's just been these last few years, so he's sort of built up this aura around him that he's unbeatable, especially in San Francisco. And it's the bleeding started with Jake Arrieta hitting a 3-run blast off of Madison Bumgarner. And the funny thing is those two kind of have like a friendly back and forth jabbering about, who's a better hitter, and they want to have a home run competition between the two of them. And Jake got to him on that one. But I never felt comfortable with that lead, even with the Cubs getting hits and working the count with Madison Bumgarner. And I don't know if he was intentionally pitching a lot of off-speed stuff, but he just didn't look like what I had seen him do against in the first game of the wild card against the Mets. It just didn't look the same, or even down the stretch in the end of the season. But the Cubs were getting to him, and they were getting hits. They just weren't putting any more runs across the plate. And that 3-run lead against the Giants in Candlestick and in San Francisco, I forget what they call that new stadium. It's always Candlestick to me. They'll always be playing in Candlestick. It'll be 2097, and I'm like, the Giants play Candlestick. But that 3-run lead just never felt safe to me, and I, in the back of my head, I'm like, they're gonna chip away at this and chip away and chip away, and that's really what they did, and ended up going up by 2 runs, and the Cubs had a hard time, just couldn't stop the bleeding. The Giants were just run after run after run, and the Cubs couldn't do anything to stop it. And as a fan, it's you're spinning so out of control. And as a Cubs fan, you already have this like ridiculous sense of being out of control, just being a Cubs fan. But when it's something like that is happening, you're just like, it's like a double whammy because you can't, you have no power. You're sitting on your couch or in the bar or wherever you're sitting, then you can't do anything. It's not like you can go on the field or be a fourth outfielder and make that catch. There's nothing you can do. And it's such a helpless feeling. And then I was just like, I can't deal. And I was so bummed, even though I predicted them to lose this game, and I didn't think it was that big of a deal to lose this game. But they were losing this game, going to the ninth, and then Chris Bryant comes out and ties it up with a 2-run blast. Suddenly, got a little more life. Oh, what's going on here? I had to go to bed. I recorded it because I have to be at. We had a busy deliverable season at work, so I had to be there early. I'm like, I got to get a couple hours sleep. I'm like, I will get up in the morning and kind of fast forward through and see what happened. And ended up going into the 13th inning. The Cubs just couldn't get to the Giants bullpen, which is supposed to have been the Achilles heel of that team. Is their bullpen is shaky, and the Cubs just couldn't get to their bullpen. You come back to Game 4, and then I didn't think about it until towards the end of the Game 4. But if you don't win Game 4, is you go to Game 5 and you got to face Johnny Cueto again. And you saw what Johnny Cueto did in Game 1. What do you have, a 2-hit game? Just one of them happened to be a home run, and he wins or loses 1-0. It's a scary proposition to have you not being able to swing the bat well, and have Johnny Cueto be coming at you. That makes it a really, really tough game to go ahead and win for a Game 5 elimination game. So Game 4 became really important, and in Game 4 the Cubs bat just went cold, down 5-2 in the ninth, and I'm sitting there just miserable, going, oh man, if they can't let the Giants win 3 in a row and win this series, they can't do that. And the Cubs came out in that ninth inning and they out-gianted the Giants. They pulled the Giants on them. Turnabout is fair play. Rizzo gets a hit, or Bryant gets a hit. Rizzo walks. Zobrist doubles and scores Bryant. Wilson Contreras singles. Jason Hayward comes to bat. He's not swinging the bat well at all. He hits into what should have been a double play. Throwing error at first. He goes to second. And which ended up, it's funny because while it was happening, I'm sitting there going, you know what? I sort of see this as a blessing in disguise. You get the out, but Hayward goes to second, and Hayward 10 times out of 10 is the faster, better base runner than Wilson Contreras. Regardless of how he's swinging the bat, Jason Hayward is probably the best base runner the Cubs have. So having him there instead of Wilson Contreras when you're trying to tie the game up is really important, and or trying to win this game. Baez comes up, hits a single. Hayward comes around to score. And then they've got the 6-5 lead. Chapman comes in the bottom of the ninth and strikes out the side. Cubs win. Just like that. And you just watch the devastated look on the Giants fans' faces because this was the Cubs' biggest comeback win in postseason history. Nobody expected this, and it was a turnabout as fair play. You could just see the look on their fans' faces, like, just got to get these outs. Just got to stop them right here. Like, you can give up 2. You can give up 2, not 3. They gave up 3. Oh, not 4, not 4. It was just the look on their faces as their season ended. And I don't care about the Giants, and I don't know any Giants fans, I don't think. But you just sort of felt bad for them because it was it's heartbreaking when something like that happens to come end your season. But I'm a Cubs fan, so it worked out for us. the Dodgers ended up beating the Nationals. I don't want to talk too much about that. I don't want to talk about that at all. So you get the Dodgers and the Cubs playing in a 7-game series for the right to face the Indians in the World Series, because we know this now. This happened this afternoon. And game 1, the Dodgers can't hit lefties. You throw John Lester in there in game 1, and he was pitching fairly well, but they were getting solid contact on him. It just, the Cubs defense behind him was playing brilliantly. So you didn't give up a lot of runs, but they were actually hitting John Lester, which is really surprising because this team doesn't hit lefties well. It was a big difference from that game 1 of the series to what you had in the Mets series last year. The Cubs defense was atrocious in the outfield last year. This year, you're seeing some phenomenal play. It's Fowler has gotten better as a center fielder. You've added Jason Hayward as an outfielder, and then whoever you trot out to left field is better than Schwarber for the most part. You have in game 1, it's a pretty back and forth game. Bryant doubles home Fowler in the first. In the second, you have Gonzalez thrown out at home, which is a big play. And then in the bottom of the second, Jason Hayward triples to start it off, and Baez doubles to score Hayward. The fifth, you have Ethier coming in and getting a pinch hit home run. And in the 8th inning, you have Gonzalez comes up and singles home Utley and Tolis. Then in the 8th, you get Zobrist come up and doubles. And then this was the weird one. This is really weird where, the Dodgers manager just really outthought himself on this one. So Zobrist doubles to start the inning on the 8th. They intentionally walk Jason Hayward and Chris Coughlin to load the bases. And you got Miguel Montero come up and boom, launches a home run, grand slam. So suddenly, and then right after that, the next batter was Fowler, and he hits a home run. So you get back-to-back home runs, 5 RBIs right there. You going into that inning, it was tied 3-3. This was a really close game at the end of the game, and the Cubs bats turned it alive. So that was those intentional walks on 2 guys that probably were going to get outs anyway, Coughlin and Hayward. I would definitely have pitched to those guys. Maybe in best case scenario they drive 1 home, but you're still alive with 1 run. If you give up 5 in that inning, it's really hard to come back from that at the end of the game. So you're like, all right, I like the Cubs' chances in a best of 7. They're up by 1. Come out for game 2. I know Clayton Kershaw's pitching, but we didn't know what we were going to expect out of him because he was pitching on short rest, and he came in between that short rest with a save opportunity to close out the series against the Nationals. And you're like, well, how much does he have left? I mean, I know he's Clayton Kershaw, and he's the best regular season pitcher in baseball over the last few years. But Dusty Baker, even though he's not anywhere associated with the Cubs anymore, totally jinxed the Cubs. Totally. Because at the end of that game when they lost, he had some sour grapes. In his press conference, he's like, you know what? They might have won the war, but what at what cost? Because we'll see what those guys have left in them after this game. And you know what? Clayton Kershaw didn't show any effects of that. I think he threw like a 2-hitter against the Cubs and just mowed them down. And then the next game, you're like, all right, I like the Cubs' chances against Rich Hill. I was talking to somebody and I said, you know what? I have a feeling they're going to tee off on Rich Hill like they did with Jeff Samardzija, and they're licking their chops to face him. Cubs are going to go up 2-1 and take command of the series. And nope, Rich Hill looked like Sandy Koufax out there. I don't know what the hell happened. The Cubs' bats just went silent. Didn't do Cubs-like things. They're pressing. They they're trying to force things. They're not taking good pitches. They're swinging at bad pitches. You could totally tell the pressure was on the Cubs. And the bats just went silent. At the end of the press conferences, they did another non-Cub-like thing. Anthony Rizzo stormed off and didn't meet with the media. It's really not like Anthony Rizzo. So you start to see the Cubs disintegrate a little bit and not show who they are. And the fans are jumping off the bandwagon like crazy. And I was talking with a buddy who's another big sports fan, and I was trying to say, listen, I'm a diehard Cubs fan. Being anxious and nervous is like ingrained in me. That's what I do. But I'm not that worried. This team is really good. This team is going to do something. I'm not worried. Is being down 2-1 when you've still got to face Clayton Kershaw another time desirable place to be? No, absolutely not. But are you out of it? No, you're down one game. And I'm recording this as the game goes on. I'm watching the Cubs open this one up. But going into this, I said, I have a feeling John Lackey's going to come up big. He's going to pull a game like he did last year facing the Cubs when he was the one pitcher that shut the Cubs down. And I think he's going to do it to the Dodgers. And for the most part, he did till the last inning when they took him out. He walked 2 batters. But he was able to get it out and contain them. And the Cubs have a commanding lead in this game of 10-2 in the bottom of the 7th. So they've got 9 more outs to get and before they tie this series up. The old saying is a series doesn't start until somebody loses a game at home. And that started really quickly for the Cubs because it goes 2-3-2. So 2 games Chicago, 3 games LA, 2 games in Chicago. And Cubs lost game 2 in Chicago. So right off the bat, that starts it off with the old adage coming to life. Then that's when the series starts. But after tonight, the Cubs will have taken one in LA, and we are starting fresh. This is a best-of-3 series because it's 2-2, even up. So best-of-3 series, and the last 2 games are in Chicago. You got to like those chances. I know the next game is Kenta Maeda, who the Cubs tagged up in the first game of the series. So they'll be facing him in Game 5, and he'll be matched up with John Lester, and you got to like the Cubs' chances there. Again, the Dodgers have a tough time hitting lefties. They're having a tough time scoring runs in general. They're batting under 200 for the playoffs. And John Lester's postseason stats this year he's got a .64 ERA. If you look at his regular season, the guy is 19-5 with a 2.44 ERA. If you look at the last 5 years versus the Dodgers hitters, Adrian Gonzalez is batting 125. Grandal is hitting 200. Hernandez 250. Kendrick 222. Peterson 0. Puig is 1 out of 3. Reddick is 200. Ruiz is 0 for 7. Seager is 0 for 6. He's dominated against these guys. So you really got to like the chances when the Kenta Maeda's postseason ERA this year is a 9. So if that's the case, and this is a big if, that you get John Lester pitching like John Lester, and the Cubs hold this lead tonight, they go back to Chicago for the final 2 games, up 3-2. Sure, they're facing Clayton Kershaw, but Clayton Kershaw in the playoffs has not been as dominant as he has in the regular season. They've seen him once already and saw what he can do. They're going to be at home, cheered on by that Chicago crowd, which is going to be just absolutely just ear-melting loud. I think they can get to him. And even if they don't, as they go down to Game 7, he's not going to pitch back-to-back days. You go out there and you have Jake Arrieta pitching Game 7 against God knows who they're going to trot out there. So this went from really abysmal to I like the Cubs' chances. I think the Cubs do it. I think they beat Kershaw to take it to go to the World Series, and they win this one in 6 in Chicago and go on to face the Indians. Book it. All right. So let's move on and talk about the Bears. I don't want to spend too much time on them because they were awful. They absolutely gave a game away. Oh, sorry. One more thing I want to talk about the Cubs. I owe Javi Baez a big apology. After his first year up in the majors, I didn't think there was anything he can do to cut down on those strikeouts and that big swing and close that hole. And I wanted the Cubs to just part ways with him in the worst way and get anything they could for him. And he has completely made me feel like a horse's ass. He's closed up the hole in his swing. The step is not as big. He's become a really clutch hitter. He's just an absolute a spark plug for this team. His attitude's infectious, and he's absolutely a magnificent fielder. He's one of the best fielders in baseball, and I'm so glad the Cubs kept him and that they didn't listen to me. So I owe you an apology, Javi Baez, and if you're old enough, I will buy you a beer. Moving on to the Bears is the Bears at home against a team that doesn't win road games. The Jacksonville Jaguars have won one road game in the past several years, and that was won on a controversial play where they were given an extra play and won the game. So Jacksonville is just a basic automatic loss when they're on the road. They come to Chicago. Chicago dominates throughout the game, and then epic collapse, and they allow Jacksonville to come back and win this game. It's disgusting. It started off bad for the Bears on that first defensive stand. You had pass interference calls on Jarrell Freeman and Jacoby Glenn. Jacksonville drives all the way to the 1 yard line. But then Jacksonville they're trying to out-Bears the Bears. You get a false start on the 1 yard line by Jacksonville, and then you get a Tracy Porter interception in the end zone that just absolutely swings the momentum. It should have been a touchdown. Their best receiver from Jacksonville, the ball hits him square in the hands. He drops it. Doesn't just drop it. It shoots it up, and it's a gift. It's just in the air, hanging there. No! Tracy Porter gets a gift from the gods. Blah! Intercepts it in the end zone, which had no business getting intercepted. It should have been, 99 times out of 100, that ball is caught and it's a touchdown. The one that hits his hands and pops straight up for Tracy Porter, who was trailing on the play. So, the gift. Huge gift, because Porter got burned on that. I guess we'll talk a little bit about the offense, a little bit about the defense, and some overall points of the Bears. Let's start on offense. You had some really predictable play calling from Dow Loggins. The Bears are getting really predictable in the plays they're calling. Not to the Terry Shea level of running the same 3 plays over and over, but they're getting really predictable in what they're doing. And the Bears aren't talented enough on offense to overcome those types of things. They've got to vary things up. They've got to be better at more plays. Still way too many pre-snap penalties on the Chicago offense. They are 3rd in the NFL in most pre-snap penalties, and they had false start from the tight end and the wide receivers. If you're not a huge football fan like I am, you might not know that tight end that's split out. I mean, it's one thing if you have an inline tight end to block and he has a false start, because he's almost like an extension of an offensive lineman. If you have a tight end that's out going to run a route as if he's a receiver, and you have a wide receiver, and they're both getting false start penalties, that's just boneheaded. That's as dumb as it gets. because when you're in a receiver role, you know what the route is, you know how you're going to get there. You just look down the line and you don't move. You don't have to hear the snap count. You don't have to know the snap count. It doesn't matter to you. You just look at the ball, and when the ball gets snapped, that's when you go. That's the way it is. So to get a false start just means you're not paying attention. It's just plain and simple. And it's infuriating. The offensive line couldn't open any holes for Jordan Howard. And as much as I like Jordan Howard, and I think he's going to be a fantastic back for the Bears, is right now you are handicapped by a running back by committee. Is none of them are the absolute back that you need to have a consistent run game in and game out. Is each of them brings a little bit of a different style. And the running style of Jordan Howard is different than Jeremy Langford, is different than Kadeem Carey. They're all a little bit different. And the way the defense is playing and the type of defense you're playing and the type of guys you're playing against is going to affect how your offensive line is blocking against those guys is going to affect how you run. And Jordan Howard, he wasn't, he was looking for those cutbacks lanes and they just weren't there. They brought in, and so he just wasn't effective, and the Bears weren't opening up holes for him. And you brought in Kadeem Carey, and he came in and just hit the holes there was a little bit of light, hit those holes and just ran through them and had a much more productive game. And that's just the style of runner he is. So you don't have one ultimate back like an Adrian Peterson, but you've got three good backs, and I'm okay with that, especially because they're all young and cheap. Alshon Jeffrey is an absolute beast. You can't lose this guy in free agency because without him, your offense just goes in the pooper. He's the best receiver they have, especially when your first-round draft pick from last year, Kevin White, can't stay on the field. Hurt all season last year. Might be out all the rest of the season. Who knows? He was finally starting to figure things out and gets hurt. So you need Alshon Jeffrey. You absolutely need him. Brian Hoyer. I can't hate on Brian Hoyer. If he was the starting quarterback, I have a lot more bitter, angry things to say about him, but he's not. He came here as the backup. He's on a one-year deal. He's the backup quarterback. He's probably one of the better backup quarterbacks in the NFL, if not the best. But he's a backup quarterback. He comes in and he's moving the ball, but he's a complete dinker and dunker. Every play he makes is the safe play. He's just like an extension of John Fox. Let's not push the envelope, guys. Come on, guys. Let's just play it straight and narrow. And that's what Brian Hoyer is. He's not turning the ball over. He's great ball protection skills. He's not throwing interceptions, which, we're so used to Jay Cutler. But the thing is I know there's a lot of you that hate Jay Cutler and don't want to hear this, but sometimes Jay Cutler forces those balls in because otherwise the Bears' offense is not moving. And that's what you're seeing with Brian Hoyer. Between the 20s, they're moving the ball up and down the field ever since he came in. Gotta love that. But once they get into the red zone, the fields get smaller. If you think about it, if you're at the 50-yard line, that field is big. You got 50 yards till the end zone, and then you got another 10 through the back. So you've got the whole sideline to sideline, and then 60 yards of field. That's a lot of room. You can spread things out. Once you're in the red zone, there's not as much room. You've got to be way more precise in your passes. The amount of room people are going to have is going to be a lot smaller. It becomes easier to defend in some ways. And Brian Hoyer is terrible in the red zone. And the Bears offense just gets stagnant in the red zone, and they kick field goals instead of getting touchdowns. When you kick field goals instead of touchdowns, sure, you're putting points on the board, but you're not putting those teams away. If you get out in the red zone 4 times, you kick 4 field goals, you're up 12-0. That's not that hard to overcome. One kickoff return, you could cut that lead by more than half. Now, if you go down there and you score 4 touchdowns on there, You're up 28-0. That's a big number to overcome. You don't have to worry about one play beating you. If you just kicking field goals, you never put that team away, and they're always right in it, and it's hard to win that way. The easiest way to win is get a big lead, make that other team's offense become one-dimensional, and then go after them. It's what everybody does against the Bears. Bears need to start doing to other people. We talked about this a little bit. Kadeem Carey looked like the more powerful runner in that game, and we talked a little bit about why. Running back styles are going to be really important with this offensive line that's not that good, and with the Bears team that's not so good. So you're going to see the Bears go with the hot hand, and that's just the way it's going to be. They're going to keep running. When Langford comes back, they're going to have all three running backs take the ball, see who's most effective. Again, you move the ball with over 300 yards of passing and lack of points. You have Cameron Meredith stepping up in the place of Kevin White and doing a good job. Is he going to be a world beater? Is he going to be your number one guy if Alshon leaves in free agency? No. But he is a nice piece. He's what you expected out of Marquise Wilson for all these years, and that's what you expected, and Cameron Meredith has given it to you. So kudos to him for making the most out of this opportunity. The TD drive that the Bears had was really nice, and the one big thing I wrote down and I underlined was no penalties. They had positive yardage plays in the red zone, so they weren't going backwards, they weren't wasting downs, positive yards in the red zone, no penalties. That's how they did it. The last drive of the first half, this was a poor clock management situation. And this is epitomizes the Bears. You're trying to score some points, and you throw a 7-yard out when it's 3rd and 10. The epitome of the Bears. When it counts, you need 10 yards, and you throw a 7-yard pass. It's mind-numbing because that defense is going to be sitting at that 10-yard mark to make sure that you don't go past it. And when you throw underneath, they're all just going to come downhill, hit you. You're not going to get that 3 yards. Just terrible. Too many drop passes by Bears receivers, and a really bad one by Kadeem Carey that he had forever and a day to run, and he was looking forward to running those yards, and he just dropped the pass. Didn't look it in his hands. The last drive of the third quarter, the Bears are in the red zone, and the way it goes is stuffed for a run on first down. They did a poor attempt at a tight end bubble screen on second down, and then a bad pass to a wide receiver on third down. Wind up having to kick field goal. They keep throwing underneath on third downs, which is hurting their third down efficiency. And then the killer was the drive after the Blake Bortles fumble in the red zone. That should have been a big, big boost to you to help put that game away. You get a incomplete pass, a sack, and another stuffed run. They can't move the ball at all. It gives new life to Jacksonville, and ultimately they go on to win the game. And then the last drive, you have a 3rd and 6 on the last drive, and then you get a holding on Jordan Howard that just sets you back. So you end up, instead of going for a 3rd and 6, which is really manageable, something you can do, it ends up being 3rd and 16, which with Brian Hoyer, really hard to get back. It makes it from something doable to something not doable. That's the thing. This Bears team is not good enough to overcome the penalties and the holes that they put themselves in. When you had Aaron Rodgers with an MVP type season, 4th and 26, he could get it, and he did against the Eagles. This is Brian Hoyer with the Bears. They can't do that. They can't do that. So they have to play smarter. They can't. They basically have to play fundamentally sound. Don't turn the ball over, and no penalties. That's the only way that they're going to win games. On the defensive side, you got a turnover. That's positive, even though it was a gift to Porter. But Porter all day, difficulty covering Allen Robinson. Just behind him all the time. And Allen Robinson's he's a nice receiver, but he's not Des Bryant. He's not, the goofy guy from the Giants. Right? He's a nice receiver, but Porter should be able to cover him. You had Adrian Amos got away with 2 blatant pass interference calls in that game. Again, he actually had an up and down game. There was some nice plays he made, but there was some plays in coverage where he just looked like he had no idea what he was doing. Harold Jones-Corte had a nasty hit on Hearns to cause an incomplete pass, which was nice to see because that makes them jittery going forward. Receivers might have short memories, but those hits, they tend to last a long time. Bears defense again had a difficult time getting any pass rush other than Willie Young. If they didn't have Willie Young, teams would have all day to throw the ball. He's all that they have, and that's sad. I mean, part of it is you have a bunch of injuries. Part of it is just the guys aren't playing well. The Bears defense they benefited a ton from a lot of Jacksonville miscues. Jacksonville is not a good team. They have a lot of talented players, and if they had a better organization, structure, and a better coaching staff, they might be making noise as far as getting a playoff spot, because they do have a lot of talent. They just can't put it together, and they have so many penalties, so many just miscues that guys running wrong routes, guys dropping big passes, a guy being open in the end zone, getting hit right in the hands and the numbers and not catching the ball. And then not only that, pops up and gets intercepted in the end zone. Those types of things. Jacksonville was giving you those all day. They were trying to give you that game, and you were just too polite to take it. The Bears, you got to take those games. The Bears defense, too many penalties. Multiple personal fouls, including one that kept the drive alive where Jacksonville scored a field goal. You can't keep drives alive. You can't give up penalties, and you especially can't give up 15-yard penalties. Like I said with the offense, this defense isn't healthy enough or good enough to stop teams when they're giving up those big chunks of penalty yardage. I talked about wide receivers and tight ends that are route running, getting ready to run routes, having false starts is the dumbest penalty on earth. The second dumbest penalty on earth is blocking the back on a kickoff return. The Bears do that with the regularity. Here's what you do. When you're blocking as on a kick return, if you see the numbers on the back of the guy's jersey, don't touch him. Don't touch him with your hands. If you get him in the shoulder, in the back of the shoulder, with your hands, they might call that, especially if there's a big run on it. They're probably going to call it. What you could do is you can use your shoulder. You could you stand there and let them run into you. You can't block them in the back. And these guys do it constantly, and I don't understand why. Mentioned this before. The Bears offense moves the ball between the 20s really well, and they're putting up a ton of yards on opposing defenses, which means that they have the ability to move the ball. They just can't score touchdowns. And touchdowns is what's going to win the game. You had a huge, we mentioned this before too, you had a huge drop pass by Kadeem Carey on the first possession of the second half, which they might have scored on that. He had all day to run. The Bears have huge home woes, and these two teams mirrored each other. Just bad teams, can't catch a break, too many penalties, too many miscues, keep shooting themselves in the foot, and the Bears out-batted the Jacksonville Jaguars. Cameron Meredith has really nice numbers and has played well. He just doesn't break any tackles. You don't have to worry about him being a tackle breaker. And then to put it into perspective is the Bears were up by 2 scores with 8:28 to go. 2 scores with 8:28 to go. And then they were up with under 5 minutes left. They were up by 6. So they've gotta take care of business. They've got to close these games out. And then you lose Josh Sitton injury. This team is bad. And then they go on a short week. They're going to go up to Lambeau Field and have to play the Green Bay Packers. And I know the Packers aren't what we expected them to be. They're not that good. They're far and away worse than the Minnesota Vikings. But you know what? They're at home. They've got Aaron Rodgers. And you're the Bears. I don't see the Bears winning this game, especially with all the injuries they have. Pernell McPhee still not coming back. Fuller still not coming back. Goldman still not coming back. Josh Sitton is now out. You're not going to have Cutler. You're not going to have Langford. You're not going to have so many guys. And this is a team that needs to get healthy to even compete. So don't look for the Bears to win this week either. This is going to be a really bad season. And John Fox, unless he goes 6-4 the rest of this season, is going to have a worse record than Mark Trestman over the first 2 years that they were here. Trestman only had 2 years. And John Fox, through his first 2 years, will have a worse record than Mark Trestman. And speaking of Trestman, he got fired already as offensive coordinator of Baltimore. So that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. I apologize for no Bulls and Blackhawks talk. I'm going to do something this next episode for them, and we'll talk about the season opener for the Bulls and the first few games of the Blackhawks. But thank you guys so much for listening. Make sure you guys have questions, comments, concerns. Hit us up. Twitter at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com. Make sure you hit subscribe on however you're listening, iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, comments, share with friends, etc. Thank you guys for listening, and until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like Denver New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on the plains.
Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears.
Oh, when the Bears go bearing down